Hello and welcome back to D&I Conversations with Louise Lowe's.
I'm Louise.
And I'm Rowena, your producer. And today we have a very special guest. We've brought on Jessie Jackson, who works at Beyond the Book Recruitment. Beyond the Book are a female-owned and female-led recruitment company, passionate about women in the workplace and women in leadership. Louise, do you want to say a little bit about women in the facilities management sector?
Yeah, it is an increasingly diverse range of women being promoted within the sector, which is really good, and then leadership levels. But it is an age-old challenge within the FM sector that traditionally it's a very male-dominated industry at the leadership team, because quite a lot of the companies that we work with are historically engineering led, so have been male, very male dominated. But this is changing and evolving, and it's something that we're passionate about supporting and trying to encourage. And it's what would be helpful, Jessie, is to obviously have a chat about your policies and some advice that you give to your clients who are trying to recruit more women.
Yeah, of course. I mean, as we were just kind of having a chat through before, Beyond the Book is still a relatively small recruitment company. And so, we don't necessarily have some of the policies in place that you would expect from larger organisations. But I think it's really interesting, as, we were founded by two women who, both had young children, and the whole point of starting Beyond the Book was to provide a workplace where, the kind of day-to-day running of mum life and work life could sync up. And naturally, we have grown to be quite a female-led business. And that's not because we don't want to recruit men into the business. We would love to, but naturally, because of where we are located and the market that we specialise in, there are just a lot of female recruiters in this particular area with this particular specialism. But what it presents for us internally as a business is a really, from my perspective, a really lovely environment, in the sense that there is no concern over my ability to be a mum and do my job. In fact, as you've just off recording seen, I'm at home today working from home with my 5-year-old in tow because he's got COVID. And, in some businesses, I think there would be a stigma attached to that, or, maybe it wouldn't be talked about, but there would definitely be a stigma attached. And I've experienced that with a lot of clients that, I've worked with over the years as well. But for Beyond the Book, that's just life. It's not an issue, and I'm no less able to do my job just because I'm working from home with my little one watching Spider-Man in the background.
And I think flexibility is it's a key issue for every business right now. It's huge in facilities management because as there are more calls, flexible working, especially from women who, rightly or wrongly, very often have a higher proportion of the childcare or the emotional load that they have to bear for the home or for the kids. Facilities management companies are saying, well, very often these roles are site-based. Very often there are specific times that people have to be there for their clients. How can we offer more flexibility? Do we have to be as stringent as we've always been, about where people work and when people work? Yeah. Or can we build flexibility into that? And I think as similarly to you, Jessie, as a woman and as a mom, having here at Boden, we have core hours, and people can come to work and leave work around those core hours, which really helps with the school runs, or can help when mornings don't go quite to plan with the little ones. I think a big thing for us is how we can offer advice to clients to ensure that they're creating an environment that feels safe and nurturing for women. A big conversation happening at the moment is around menopause, which I know is something that is talked about quite a lot in your company.
Yeah, absolutely. We have quite a few ladies in our office who are going through the menopause. And so it's not a frowned upon subject. It's talked about daily, and the struggles that come along with that. And actually that's been a real eye-opener for me, because in the environment that we have at Beyond the Book, it's so natural that I haven't really thought about how that would feel for someone who is going through it, maybe working in a male-led environment, or a male-dominated environment. I suppose for some women that could be quite a difficult thing to talk about. I think that would present problems in terms of a lack of understanding about what going through the menopause actually means for someone, and the implications that can have from one day to the next. The symptoms are different. There are multiple ladies in our office who are getting very little sleep at the moment, but also, there are some other medical issues that come alongside it, doctor's appointments, medication, things like that. And that just comes very naturally to us. But I totally understand that if it's not talked about, or if someone doesn't feel safe talking about that in the environment that they work in, then there's an absolute need to make that, to not have a stigma attached to it.
I've seen companies who are bringing in menopause leave now, alongside menopause support groups, and people giving better information than ever before about it. I think the menopause leave is a really interesting one, and another one that's come up recently is period leave. One company are talking about how they're giving 10 period leave days a year to each woman in their organisation, just as a way of kind of highlighting that actually some days it's so bad that it's really difficult to come into work. And I suppose that raises a whole load of issues around equality.
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting one for me, and something that I haven't come across, because while on the one hand, I think a company that is forward thinking enough to bring in period leave for female colleagues, that is absolutely amazing, and is long overdue that it's getting the recognition, not necessarily the leave, but the recognition.
Yeah.
The questions that throws up for me is, I can absolutely see how there might be hurdles to overcome when you're offering 10 extra period leave days a year to your female colleagues. Are you then discriminating against your male colleagues, or how do they feel about that at the very least? That throws up loads of interesting questions, I think.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, it's also a broader trust issue that you're empowering your team to be honest and rely on the fact that they're not going to take all of the 10 days if they don't need them. Yeah. It is very much sort of a trust culture, so that if you genuinely are feeling that awful, that you'll take them accordingly. Yeah. But I think there is a big issue in that some people are absolutely fine with it, and some people suffer massively from the hormonal imbalance every month, and that it does need recognising and assisting with. And again, this is all the broader D&I perspective of attracting and retaining your female talent, and nurturing a supportive and inclusive culture. Yeah. Because an inclusive culture means lots of different things. It doesn't just mean maternity leave, it does mean all these additional things, whether it is mental health. It's the same with men as well. It's men's mental health, and it's different things that can affect men as well. So it's not just exclusively female policies, but I'm fully supportive of progressive policies that will help be inclusive in whatever capacity that is.
And I think this is almost the difference between equality and equity, and acknowledging that those two things aren't the same. We talk about EDI, and that usually means equality. But if equality is levelling the playing field, but actually the people standing on the playing field are different heights, you haven't reached a position of equity. It's almost got to be kind of explained, I suppose, in terms of, for example, period leave. What those people who think it's totally unfair for women to get 10 extra days leave, it has to kind of, how do you explain to those people that, but at the moment those people are hugely hindered at least one day a month. They're still having to come to work, they're still having to do their job, but very often in crippling agony, or at least with huge hormonal issues that make it very difficult to do things like make basic decisions. Or is that just me? I don't know. We have this huge challenge once a month that we're trying to overcome, and it may not feel like it's equality to give these people 10 extra days sick leave a year, but in reality it's equity, because all you're doing is taking what is at the moment a huge imbalance of fairness and trying to balance that out.
And that leads to a number of other topics as well. For example, you talk about maternity leave, but you've also got equity when somebody's pregnant. So somebody sails through pregnancy without anything, no problems at all. Other people will have severe sickness, severe nausea, severe tiredness, and it's how you adapt your management style and level of support for those individuals as well, to make sure that they feel safe, supported, nurtured, and that you'll help them through that time and give them the support and flexibility that they might need in terms of working hours or going to additional doctor's appointments if there are problems, that it's not frowned upon. I had it myself. I had several complications towards the end. To be fair, my employer at the time were very supportive. It wasn't a problem to work from home, to go to hospital appointments, and that really engendered a feeling of loyalty and gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely.
For being for being flexible and supportive, because I think if they hadn't been, it would have made me think, well, is it worth going back?
Yeah, I had the exact opposite experience when I was having my second child. The company I worked for, the manager that I worked for, she, as a childless woman, I think just really didn't understand at all. So I was allowed the absolute bare minimum, and always begrudgingly. And it did mean that I came back after maternity leave and handed my notice in. I didn't go back because I didn't feel like it was a place where, given how little flexibility I'd been given when I was throwing up in the office, that I'd be given any kind of flexibility as a mum.
And I think this is what all of these policies come back to, isn't it? It's not necessarily what that policy actually says itself. It's about the support that demonstrates from your employer.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
The period leave, the support during pregnancy, whatever that might be, ultimately the result is a feeling of a safe environment where you are supported by your employer, and the loyalty and the feelings that then brings up in the person who is being supported.
Yeah, so it's really valued, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So Jessie, I wonder if you, from a recruiter's perspective, wouldn't mind maybe going through a couple of the bits of advice that you would give to kind of male-dominated organisations, and we do work in a male-dominated sector, to help attract female talent at higher levels.
Yeah, of course. And I think this, I don't mean to be fluffy with it, but I think that this really largely depends on where they are in their thought process already. If this is a male-dominated environment that haven't even thought about introducing these policies, then I think the first thing to get them to do is really sit down and think about what that means, both from an internal culture perspective, but also from a candidate attraction perspective, and what the benefits are to everybody involved in addressing these issues. I think if it's an organisation where they are demonstrating some of these supportive policies to an extent, then I think the conversation then has to be around the candidate attraction piece, especially. I know everyone keeps banging on about it, but I know there is no hiding the fact that we are in a candidate-led market, and candidates have a multitude of opportunities in front of them most of the time. So it's less about the basic policies that you would expect, and it's then more about what that business does over and above everyone else to make them the most attractive prospect. And if that means implementing 10 days period leave, because what that demonstrates to me, if I was interviewing with an employer that offered that as one of their policies, I'm not concerned necessarily about the period leave. What that demonstrates to me is that this company is ensuring that it's innovative in what it's offering, in that it's forward thinking, and that it does have a focus on diversity and inclusion. And that whole package there is what would make me want to join that organisation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally agree.
I guess we need to get onto the sticky topic of pay. I think that, there's no denying that there's a huge pay gap still, in the UK, potentially wider within the FM sector than other sectors out there. And I think pay transparency is still something that, you know, really needs work. One of the things that we try to advise all of our clients is make sure that you tell your candidates what the pay range is. This is a huge bugbear of mine, but seeing job ads that don't have a salary range on absolutely boils my blood. The idea that we have enough time to have a conversation about a role without even knowing if that role will pay the bills.
It's damaging for a brand, and it's damaging from a candidate attraction perspective.
I've heard it, not particularly within the FM sector, but friends and ex-colleagues have had this situation where they've not had the conversation, gone into an interview, competency-based interview situation, wasted a whole hour and a half of their time, to then be found that, you know, find out that the salary is 10 grand below what they're either on or looking for. And it's just a really poor way of, it's completely wasting people's time. And it encourages the pay, you know, very much encourages the pay gap because of the lack of transparency.
But on that, I spoke to a candidate literally yesterday, to book her in for an interview for an organisation, and knew that she had something else at second stage. So I asked her what that role was offering in comparison, and she didn't know. And she's at second stage interview, you know. And I said, well, you need to find that out, because you've potentially gone through a 2-stage interview process for a role that's not going to be the right salary for you.
And I'm always really clear, you know, if people aren't willing to tell you who, in my instance, who the end client is or what the salary range is, you really want to question the ethics of the business, because genuinely, you know, at the senior level, there are very few situations where it's so confidential that you can't reveal that information. Sometimes I think it's a control mechanism.
I actually think that I tend to see this from a marketing perspective. So to be clear, I wouldn't work with a client that wasn't prepared to disclose that information. But for example, with that candidate yesterday who's interviewing, you know, with another organisation, not through me, that I see that happen quite a lot on the junior end of the market, and I think that that's taking advantage of you know, junior candidates who maybe, you know, haven't been through this process before or don't know what to expect,
and trying to get them on the cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically.
And again, that is over and over and over again going to hurt women more than men, because women will not ask for what they're worth. They won't negotiate as hard in pay rises, and it will continue to engender this huge pay gap that we have. When I see a company who are transparent about their pay at every level, it's one I know that is working towards closing that gender pay gap, because it's the only way to do it is to be open and honest about what you're paying people.
I'm really interested to get your opinion in do you think that that's a real issue in the facilities management market? Because genuinely, from my perspective in marketing, it's certainly not been an issue for me in the 10 years I've specialised, because the organisations I've worked with have been completely transparent about the salary bracket, and I don't see that gap between male and female candidates.
Yeah, I do to a degree. In terms of FM, you can come through a variety of routes, but a lot of more females will traditionally come through the soft services, cleaning, catering, security route, where they would have been paid less on that route up to a management level role, whereas more males will come through the engineering route.
Yeah, with you.
Associated qualifications, etc. And by the point they get to a contract manager, account manager role, there can be a disparity of up to 10k, depending, because the engineers are seen as more technical, more valued. So you'll have people, and I'm still surprised of people who've got more of a traditional soft services facilities background now going for a role managing, X amount of £1 million worth of contracts, and there could be £10,000-15,000 salary difference.
Yeah.
So and I think that's mainly because of the route to that level.
That's really interesting.
Still there and still needs very much addressing.
So we decided we wanted all of these podcast episodes to be very actionable. We wanted to give people real life things that they can put in place to improve on their diversity and inclusion. And I think we've mentioned a couple already around pay transparency, around having conversations around the policies that you're willing to put in place to ensure that safe environment for women, nurturing environment for women. I think another that I'm really passionate about is that pertains to recruitment specifically is interviewing panels. I think it is so important if you're trying to bring women into your organisation, making sure that when you interview them, there is a high level female member of the interviewing panel. It speaks volumes around your commitment to women in the workplace.
Yeah. And I saw that on another podcast the other day where the client in question is very much doing that, is trying to bring a much broader interview panel who is at a similar level but don't necessarily do the same job function, so that they've got a broader view of that individual's skill sets and what else they could bring to the overall company as opposed to just the role. I think that's quite innovative. It's it's very progressive, and so far they've had very positive feedback in terms of how that's positively affected their recruitment process.
I completely agree, and I think I work with a lot of SMEs who typically, may not do that or may not have thought about doing that in an interview process, usually because it's the hiring manager that's interviewing them, and then they may have, a meet the team thing. But that's certainly, I've seen a big change in that over the last couple of years, and the recognition that, even if they're not in a position where they could specifically bring a senior level woman in the business into the interview process, to give that diversity at interview stage, like you said, across different roles, different functions within a business, and it's been really positive for my candidates.
Amazing. And on that bombshell, I think we might have come to the end of this week's podcast. Jessie, thank you so much for joining us. As ever, you are a delight.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time.
And listeners, as always, if you have any topics that you would like us to cover on diversity, equality, equity and inclusion, please just give us a shout. We're always looking for inspiration. We will see you next week.